And a key thing about the AYAC REACH project is recognizing that actually when we talk about adolescents and young adults with cancer, that we're actually talking about a group of young people who are sharing a very important experience of a cancer diagnosis, but in many, many ways come from all walks of life. And in the research to date, we do know that sometimes the characteristics or aspects of our identity or our experiences that make us who we are, that define our identity, can actually have challenges in terms of our experience of generally healthcare, but particularly around cancer screening, diagnosis, and outcomes. So what we wanted to do within our project was to actually try and illuminate the diversity of experience within this population and to try and find out as much as we can about who these young people with cancer are. The team brings together medics, academics, allied health professionals from across our partner sites, working with fantastic people, including Peter McCarthy, who's going to be on this webinar later. And the real shared position that we have is that we really don't know enough about this population. And that while we talk about AYACs, is the term we use, or CAYA, we are recognizing that there's a lot of mixed experiences in that group. So our project is trying to do three things in the first instance. First is we do want to get an understanding of the demographics of this group and to take a really broad perspective. So when it comes to something like gender identity, to move beyond traditional binary views of male and female, to encourage and allow young people to tell us how they identify in terms of gender, to tell us how they identify in terms of sex and sexuality, to share with us the characteristics of their ethnic or cultural identity, their socioeconomic identity, and as much as possible to really have no parameters around what they can share with us in terms of who they are. And within that space, the aim is to really understand how we can best shape identity affirming cancer care. And there's a lot of discussion of gender affirming cancer care, but actually we're broadening that to talk about identity confirming. So what does that mean for people who may be on the webinar today? Well, we're going to be in the next month or so starting our recruitment for a survey of adolescents and young adults with cancer to try and identify the groups within this population of people. And so we have been working with colleagues in Crumlin and in James's and in UCD and DCU to address all of the data protection and ethical concerns that come with asking very sensitive questions and recording very personal data about individuals, and making sure that we're managing those data in the most secure and careful way, because we are asking for a lot of support from young people filling in the survey and telling us about their experience. The other thing we're doing as well is including a category of people who, for no particular characteristic, may feel marginalized within society, and trying to understand how that sense of marginalization may actually impact on how they feel welcomed and seen and respected within the health space generally. So we're hoping that this survey will give us a really good picture of the makeup of this group, of the variety of subgroups and identities and characteristics that may be influencing the experience that these groups have of their cancer care, and ultimately to be able to make recommendations. So just to wrap up, our project is really trying to reach out into this AYAC population, gather as much of an understanding of who they are, how they identify, and to talk with them about the implications that that may have for their experience as cancer patients. So I'm going to wrap up there in the interest of time, and I look forward to any questions that people may have.
Thanks so much, Suzanne. That was a really interesting and insightful talk, and really looking forward to starting to get the results of this project. It's great that it's going to be kicking off soon. So next up, we have Dr. Naomi Algio from Trinity St. James's Cancer Institute. So Naomi is here to talk about her ICS-funded Allied Health Award, which is looking to see what are the unmet needs of adolescents and young adults for their reintegration into education and employment. So Naomi, if you want to share your slides there.
Great, thanks a million, Claire. I'll just play from the start there. Hi everyone, and thanks Claire for the introduction. My name is Naomi and I am a clinical academic OT based between St. James's Hospital and Trinity. And I suppose I was very grateful to the Irish Cancer Society for this award, which enabled me to start this piece of research back in December. So just to give you an idea of what we're trying to find out and how we're asking these questions. This is a report from the HSE and our National Cancer Control Programme, and it's a framework, and it was really important because it was really one of the first national reports that I suppose underlined the importance that we need to look at research for the group of children, adolescents and young adults. And really, if you look at the international literature, and we know this anyway, anecdotally, we know that there are issues with fatigue, cognition, so things like changing in thinking skills, stress, anxiety, body image. That's, I mean, just a nutshell in terms of description from physical and psychological issues. But these all feed into our day-to-day. And I suppose now that we're looking more at survivorship issues, there's this new realization that things like return to education, so whether that's school or higher education or work, are important. And this area was actually noted as challenging by AYAs themselves. And there was a UK research priority setting exercise very recently, and AYAs themselves noted return to education and work as a top 10 research priority. So really what we're trying to do with this piece of research is really, number one, to look at, well, what are the physical, psychological and social issues that AYAs living with and beyond cancer experience that could impact on return to school, college or work. We also want to get a sense of, well, what are the experiences of AYAs in terms of navigating that return to education and work piece? So what helped, what limited them? And then really, what would their preferred supports, or what kind of supports would they like to see in terms of managing that transition? And together, bringing all this together will help us inform the types of services and supports that we can develop. So in terms of what study actually looks like, it's mixed methods. And what that means is that we're doing a qualitative piece and a quantitative piece. So our quantitative piece is we're going to do surveys, and we are going to be asking lots of different questions to try and get a sense of what these physical and psychological issues might be for people. But we're also going to complete semi-structured interviews. So we want to have an idea, really get in-depth idea about what the experiences, what those lived experiences are in terms of return to education and work. So who we're looking at, I know the AYA cohort is 16 to 24. We are going to extend this to 26 years as long as they had their cancer diagnosis, you know, either 24 or before that. They need to have finished curative treatment in the last 2 years and are either planning or have returned to education or work. And again, any cancer type. So again, the questionnaires and semi-structured interviews, we'll do our data analysis, and then hopefully, I suppose we will, well, I'm going to talk about the next slide about what our outputs will be. So what do we actually want to achieve? But all while this is happening, we have a wonderful steering group who we met for the first time back in December, so rather January just gone by. And this is a group that really keeps us on track about, are we asking the right questions? How can we improve this research? And that includes patients themselves, patient advocates, healthcare professionals, academics, and national cancer policy informers. So ultimately, ultimately we want to develop services, but we will also disseminate, I suppose, present our findings through publication, webinars, social media platforms, information events across the 3 AYA designated centres. And excitingly, we're also going to develop an AYA module for the Masters in Cancer Survivorship here in Trinity, amongst other outputs. So next steps, we have applied for ethical approval, so that is ongoing. And while we wait, we've just started another piece of research in terms of a systematic review for supports for AYAs, and really keep an eye out for how you or your child can get involved. We will be inviting participation through social media and in clinic as well in Crumlin and St. James's. So very happy to take any questions later. Thank you very much, and a huge thank you again to the Irish Cancer Society.
Thanks so much, Naomi. That's a great talk, and it's really great to see the PPI input that you have at such an early stage of the project, and something that we in the Irish Cancer Society are very passionate about, so well done. So just a reminder, if you guys have any questions for any of our speakers, and Naomi and Suzanne have already spoken, please do put them into the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to them at the end of all the talks. So our next speaker is Dr. Luke Jones from UCD. So Luke is our 2020 Translational Research Fellow, and he is here today to tell us about his research identifying more effective treatments for pediatric blood cancer. So thanks a million, Luke, if you'd like to share your screen.
Great. So thank you very much for the opportunity to talk. So as Claire just mentioned, I'm looking at finding more effective treatments for pediatric blood cancers. And so what I'm looking to do is to look into what's called cell signaling. So all cells in the body talk to each other, and the way that these signals are relayed is something called cell signaling. So you can see on the left what we would usually use as a way to show this. These cells are transmitted by proteins called kinases in the cell, which pass a message on, usually down to the DNA level, to have an effect. So whether or not a cell should to live or die, or to grow, etc. But what happens in something like leukemia, these kinases can be mutated, and this causes a problem in this signaling network, causing the cells to become overactive and to overgrow, essentially, leading to leukemia growth. The way that I've best thought to show this previously, despite knowing nothing about soccer, is using the soccer analogy there. So basically, the guy at the top has just found a huge can of Monster Energy drink and is very overactive. And one thing I forgot to mention is that kinases often like to pair up to have their effect. So the guy in the middle, Raf, likes to be with his twin, the other Raf. And so what happens usually is this guy's found his Monster, kicks the ball to Raf, down to Mick, and scores a goal. And so there are drugs called kinase inhibitors available, and using one of these drugs will knock out one of the Rafs, but then Raz will just, or Chaz will just switch sides and pass it to the other Raf, and it'll have the same effect. And so essentially what we're trying to do is to take out both of the Rafs in order to make sure there is no goal, the goal being leukemia growth. And so my project is all about looking at all of the available kinase inhibitors that are out there, and putting them into a computer simulation to predict which two or which pairs might be the best to use, because these kinase inhibitors are often best used in combination. The way that I'm testing these in preliminary work is to use what's called leukemia cell lines. So these laboratory models that were originally taken from patients, so they are leukemia samples, but they have been grown in a lab for a very long time. They've adapted to growing in a very artificial environment. So while they're a good workhorse of the lab work that we do, they are an imperfect model of leukemia, but they're a good first pass. And so I've been using those to look at different kinase inhibitors on their own, and to model or to test the predictions that we've made through the computer simulation in order to find the best combinations that might be beneficial for patients. Because that model is imperfect and it's a long gap between those results and what we might observe in patients, I'm also using an animal model of leukemia, which is much closer to a patient's leukemia. So a patient's leukemia is actually taken from a routine sampling, so a diagnosis, for example, and these leukemias are put into mice and expanded. This, on one side, this allows us to do something very unique and really beneficial to future research, which is to actually expand these very precious to research samples and to store them for more investigation later on. But the main thing that I'm using them for is to test these predictions in these leukemia models to see if the combinations will be beneficial in patients. And the results that we get from this are much closer to what you'd see in a clinical scenario, because these are patient leukemias. And so we're actually testing on the human leukemia just in an animal surrogate. And so that's my project in a nutshell. And we're looking to find basically better combinations that are more effective than current therapies and also have fewer side effects.
Thanks so much, Luke, for a lovely talk. And I love the football analogy. I think that's the most unique way I've seen cell signaling explained ever. So it's a great way to show it. So next we have Jennifer Fitzpatrick. So Jennifer is one of our PhD scholars. She goes to the Technological University of the Shannon in Athlone. And she is going to talk about her PhD project looking to work with adolescents who are affected by cancer to develop a health behavior change intervention. So Jennifer, you've already got your slides up, so kick off there.
Super. Hi everyone, and a very warm welcome to you all today. My name is Jennifer Fitzpatrick and I'm an Irish Cancer Society PhD student, and as Claire mentioned, I'm based in the Technological University of the Shannon, which is formerly known as Athlone Institute of Technology. And my research is focused on exploring physical activity and food habits among teenagers in Ireland who are recovering from cancer. So today I would like to give you a brief insight into my research and its journey over the next few years. I will touch on what we know about childhood cancer, previous research, and then where this project will take us. So as we know, every year in Ireland, around 200 children and teenagers receive a cancer diagnosis, and the most common include leukemias and tumours of the brain and central nervous system. The number of survivors of childhood cancer is growing thanks to improvements in the treatment and management of cancer. Unfortunately, however, cancer treatment can be associated with negative side effects, which can reduce children and teenagers' well-being, physical capacity, and overall quality of life. Research conducted in Canada, Germany, and Australia has shown that taking part in healthy lifestyle behaviours like being physically active and eating healthily can have many benefits for teenagers who are recovering from cancer. This includes reducing the risk of developing heart problems, obesity, and diabetes in later life, while also helping to strengthen their muscles and bones and decrease feelings of extreme tiredness. However, no Irish research is available which has explored teenagers' experiences of physical activity and food habits throughout their cancer journey. So this project will bridge this gap and generate new knowledge regarding Irish teenagers' lived experiences of physical activity and food. And then such knowledge is vital in informing the development and delivery of programs and services for teenagers recovering from cancer, which aim to optimize their health and well-being during this time. So I'm currently in my second year of my PhD, and my research is divided into completing 2 research studies. The first research study will involve talking to teenagers aged 12 to 16 years and young adults who are recovering from cancer, their parents, guardians, and also healthcare professionals. So this research is currently underway, and I have completed 30 interviews to date. The purpose of this research is to explore the lived experiences of physical activity and food habits over the course of their cancer journey, their specific needs and recommendations for a support program for teenagers. This essential information will then help inform the creation of this support program that is specifically designed with and for teenagers in Ireland who are recovering from cancer. And then study 2 in this research will involve testing the support program. We will look to see if teenagers who are recovering from cancer are interested in this type of support programme. Is it possible to deliver, and what are the immediate benefits? The programme then has the potential to be scaled and delivered across community settings nationwide. As such, it is hoped that the programme will have a legacy beyond the scope of this study, and pending further research funding being secured, will go on to be investigated as part of a larger national trial. One of the most influential aspects of this research is our advisory group, which includes 3 teenagers and their parent from Canteen, Ireland. These teenagers and families are involved in this research over the course of 4 years. They will assist in guiding the research and development of the support programme, significantly improving how this research is conducted with and for teenagers recovering from cancer in Ireland. The 4-year funding provided by the Irish Cancer Society and in partnership with TUS will allow for the time and scope to adhere to best practice for the development of the support programme, ensuring that a patient-centred approach underpins the entirety of the project. Thank you for listening, and I would like to give a special thank you to all families helping to shape the future of health behaviour research among childhood cancer survivors in Ireland, and to the following charities for their continued support throughout: Canteen Ireland, Childhood Cancer Ireland, Oscars Kids Club, Barrettstown, and the Gavin Glynn Foundation. Thank you.
Thanks a mil, Jennifer, and best of luck with all the data analysis. I'll be really excited to see the results of this project. So best of luck now for the rest of your PhD.
Thank you.
So our next speaker is Dr. Noelle Cullinan from Children's Health Ireland in Crumlin. And Noelle is going to talk to us about her work developing a paediatric cancer genetic service for children predisposed to cancer. So thanks, Noelle.
Thanks so much, Claire. So it's a pleasure to be here chatting with you all today. As you can see from the slide in your introduction, Claire, I'm a paediatric oncologist here at Children's Health Ireland in Crumlin, and through a collaboration between the Irish Cancer Society and CHI, I was tasked early last year to develop a multidisciplinary paediatric cancer genetic service within the Children's Cancer Centre here at Crumlin. So it's lovely to be able to share an update on where we are at this point in time. So I guess just from a bit of background in terms of genetics and paediatric cancer and why we need a dedicated cancer genetic service, I guess first of all, there is increasing awareness internationally about the presence of cancer predisposition syndromes in children with cancer. And that knowledge is growing not just amongst health professionals, but also amongst patients, parents and their families. And we know that at least 10% of children with cancer have an underlying gene variant that explains why they developed cancer in the first place. Internationally, with the advance of technologies and advanced sequencing techniques, we're using genomic technologies not just in diagnostics, but also as part of larger genomic sequencing initiatives. And many of those initiatives are revealing additional children who require cancer predisposition syndrome risk assessment. And of course, that means that there's lots of people being referred for genetic evaluation. And we know, of course, that limited resources are, a barrier at times to getting children and families seen in a prompt manner. And why is that important? I guess from the point of view of children, the children that I see and their families, if we diagnose a child with a cancer predisposition syndrome, that has implications not just for the child's treatment, but also their ongoing disease surveillance. And in many cases, we identify family members who might also carry the same pathogenic variant, and they also then require genetic counselling, access to screening, and for the child themselves, when they grow up and they become adults, we also need to counsel them about future reproductive risks. And for many different gene issues, there are international surveillance recommendations in place. And we know that enrolling children and young people in screening programs is really important because we may be able to improve morbidity and mortality in affected individuals. And so this is becoming increasingly important. And so dedicated cancer genetics expertise here in Ireland is a vital component of comprehensive paediatric cancer care. And so I was tasked with establishing a dedicated service here at Crumlin, aiming to provide a comprehensive service that incorporates risk assessment for all children with cancer, while being cognizant of the limited resources that we have at our disposal. And the main aims were really to expedite, streamline, mainstream and prioritise access to genetic testing, evaluation and evidence-based follow-up care for children with cancer and their families through the establishment of an MDT meeting, collaboration with the clinical genetics health professionals here, along with the haematologists and oncologists, and merging all of our resources. And so that's what we have done. We have managed to initiate testing early in the haematology oncology space. We've been able to streamline patients from the service to clinical genetics via an MDT. We've been able to discuss results, initiate testing and retrieve results, and promptly discuss results at an MDT level with return of results to families, initiating disease surveillance recommendations in families where there are evidence-based guidelines in place. And we've been able to refer family members onwards for predictive testing. And so I'm acting as the go-between really between the haematology oncology team and the clinical genetics service. And I meet all of the families at the moment who there is a suspicion that there is a cancer risk in their family. And second to that, we've also been able to establish a cancer surveillance clinic for children who have a confirmed cancer predisposition syndrome, where they will be hooked into disease surveillance where it is appropriate. And so collaboration is absolutely the key to the success of this initiative. And I've put a timeline at the top of your screens. As I said, I was appointed last year. It took several meetings between the services to figure out how we would go about building the service. And I started accepting referrals from April last year. At this point in time, we've had, I think, 8 MDTs, the most recent being last week, and the National Cancer Control Programme approved funding for genetic counselor with a special interest in paediatric cancer genetics in summer last year, which is due for recruitment shortly. And so we look not just at the child, but we also look at the tumour type, whether or not they've had significant toxicities to therapy. We look at the family history of cancers, if there is one, and then we determine whether or not we are concerned about the child and whether they merit testing. And as I said, at the moment, I'm acting as the go-between between these two services to ensure that everybody gets equitable access to the service. This is a busy slide, but just to highlight the progress we've made. So we looked back at the 3 years prior to the development of this service in terms of genetic referrals for evaluation from the haematology oncology service to genetics here at Crumlin. And we only referred about just short of 30, so 29 children referred from the haematology oncology service over a 3-year period, so just under 10 per year. And since we started the service, this slide doesn't include the data from our February meeting last week. We'd already discussed 32 children and pedigrees and offered testing in all families. And as a result of that, we've uncovered 10 families where the child has a confirmed cancer predisposition syndrome. And we are now cascade testing those families to detect additional family members who may also be at risk of cancer development. And we also have confirmed additional family members in a number of cases. Of course, this is a big body of work, and we're still in the very early phases of this initiative, but it's certainly showing merit already. In terms of where we go for the future, this was the aim at the start was, this slide. And so we've achieved many of those goals so far. We already have a monthly MDT meeting. We're reviewing results very carefully and recommending and linking children to surveillance where it's appropriate. We've actually changed our practice in terms of what genetic testing we offer in certain children with particular types of tumours in the kidneys. And we are due to recruit a dedicated haematology oncology genetic counsellor, which is due to go out for advertisement, I think, later this month. As I mentioned, we have a cancer surveillance clinic up and running, and I think I have 10, actually I've had a couple more referrals since the slide was done. So I'm seeing many children now who have a confirmed cancer syndrome. And the plan going forward, the 2 to 5 year plan is that we will be offering expanded access to genetic testing to all children with cancer over the coming couple of years, with access especially for children who are transitioning from paediatric to adult services, so that people who may not have been eligible previously will become eligible for genetic testing based on evolution of their family history or changes in guidelines. Of course, I'd love to work with patients and families. Many of the patients and families I'm working with at the minute are very engaged in this service, but of course we need more help to develop this service further, and we'll continue to collaborate nationally and internationally to develop clinically meaningful research initiatives in this group of unique patients. So the development of the service really has changed our practice. It's been impactful for patients and families, meaningful for healthcare professionals. It aligns with the national strategy, which was recently launched. We've shown its successes so far. This is the start of something that I think will make a meaningful difference to lots of people, and it really proves that collaboration breeds success. So my final slide is just to say a huge thank you to everybody who's been involved in this initiative so far, my haematology oncology colleagues here in Crumlin, but also importantly, the clinical genetics department here at Crumlin and the genetic counselling team, who've been a really, really important cog in this process. We couldn't have done it without them. And of course, the NCCP for funding our soon to come genetic counsellor, and of course, the Irish Cancer Society for allowing me to do this work. So thank you all. Happy to take questions.
Thanks so much, Noelle, for a great talk. I think we can all agree how vital such a service is. So well done in your work in it so far. Just a reminder, we'll be asking questions at the end. So if any of you have any questions for any of our speakers so far and to come, please do put them in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. So our next speaker is Professor Adrian Bracken from Trinity College Dublin, and Adrian is going to talk to us about his research, which looks to understand the disease biology underpinning the pediatric brain tumour DIPG. So thanks a million, Adrian.
Thanks so much, Claire. So I'm a lecturer or PI group leader in genetics in Trinity College. So I run a lab, and we're focused on one particular cancer in terms of pediatric cancers. And this is a cancer that unfortunately is not curable to date. So there's a lot of research put into it, obviously for that reason. Just to tell you a little bit about it, it's a brain cancer and it occurs, you can see the age profile on the bottom there, usually in young children. And biologically, we know it's a block in differentiation. So these neural stem cells that would be in the brain, they become blocked in terms of their ability to mature into what are called glial cells, which are supportive cells in the brain. So instead, the cells continue to divide. And as shown in this slide here, there was little or nothing that can be done in terms of chemotherapy, radiotherapy not working. So a very big breakthrough occurred in 2012, and that was coming out of sequencing. So looking at the DNA sequence of these cancers, and it discovered that there's one particular gene, which I'm going to tell you about in the next few slides, is mutated in 80% of these children. So the majority of these cancers are caused by the change in one gene. The gene is called histone H3, and it's mutated at a position 27. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. And just to say, in subsequent years, about 6 years later, it was discovered that this is the initial mutation in these cancers. In other words, this mutation is the start of the cancer. And then, of course, other mutations can happen and do happen, but this is the mutation that's present in all of these cancers in these patients. So why was my lab interested in this? Well, it was a big surprise. And without going into all the biology of this, just to say that the histone H3 gene encodes a protein called histone H3, and at position 27, it actually is a very important position on this protein that's modified by an enzyme called EZH2. I'll tell you a little bit about EZH2 in a little while. And then this is what we call in the chromatin world a writer enzyme. And then there are reader proteins, for example, CBX4, that read that particular mark when it's present, and then they cause genes to be turned off. So when we think about cellular density, neural stem cells, or heart cells, these cells are all different. They have the same genes, but sometimes you have to turn off genes involved in being a heart cell in a neuron and vice versa. So our lab studied the biology of these enzymes and genes, but it turns out that the mutation in this particular cancer is affecting this biology. So we became interested in it. To cut a long story short, we used we developed a model of human hindbrain neural stem cells. So that's where this cancer arises. We were able to essentially put the normal version of this gene, histone H3, into cells, and also the mutated version, which we call K27M. And we did a lot of biology, which is what we study chromatin biology, and we came to, and that work was published 2 years ago now, nearly 2 years ago. And we came up with, I suppose this is the punchline from a clinical perspective. We tested lots of different drugs, some of which are already in clinical trials, trying to extend the lifespan or indeed cure these children. But actually, this is the drug through the underlying biology we did in this paper that we found that works better in these cancers. So we propose that as a treatment to treat these patients, because this particular drug, the drug that inhibits the function of the EZH2 enzyme, actually has been used in the treatment of adult cancers. So I'll show you that. So this is a clinical trial of human adult lymphoma cancers. They have mutations in the EZH2 gene, that's an oncogene in that context. And these EZH2 inhibitors are approved by the FDA in the US and in Europe to treat these particular cancers. So this drug that we're proposing for the pediatric cancer is already in use for the treatment of adult cancers. So I guess that's one step closer to being a viable option for the treatment of this so far incurable pediatric cancer. I'll try and move along as quickly as I can. There's a lot of information on this slide, but just to say what it is, we also did, this is subsequent work that we hope to publish in the next year or less, hopefully. And so what we did was we asked the question, of all the 20,000 genes that are available in a human cell, which are the genes that this cancer really cannot do without? And so it's what's called a genome-wide CRISPR screen. So we found the same gene we published in the previous paper, EZH2, plus a few other genes. And interestingly, they're involved in the same biology, and more promisingly as well, one of those genes, CBX4, we have a drug for it. So we're working that up in terms of either a combination therapy with EZH2, so two drugs hitting the same cancer, maybe that will work better, maybe it'll synergize, or even an alternative therapy. So we have, out of this genome-wide CRISPR screen, we also have some other genes that we think are druggable, and we're working on those. And beyond that, we think that there are other cancers that, pediatric cancers that could be used, with these drugs could be used for as well, based on the underlying biology. So a great thank you to the Irish Cancer Society. Gerard Bryan, who's now a group leader working on pediatric cancers, has been able to set up his own lab, and he was funded by the Irish Cancer Society, and also AJ Silva started his research career as a result of funding from the Irish Cancer Society. So I'd like to thank everyone in my lab and the Irish Cancer Society in particular. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Adrian. Really great talk, and great to see this work on such an aggressive cancer types. Thanks, Emil. Our final speaker for today is Dr. Peter McCarthy from CHI. And Peter is going to tell us about the importance of PPI in CAYA research, something we in the research team are very passionate about. So delighted to hear your talk, Peter.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to present this afternoon and to briefly share some of the work that we're doing as part of the YPAG, our Young Persons Advisory Group at the National Children's Cancer Service. So I suppose the genesis of the YPAG and where it came from initially is I split my time and have previously split my time between the clinical world. I work as a hematologist here in the Children's Hospital in Crumlin, and I also took some time to try and figure out what goes on in the lab side of things. So working in the lab in UCD. And as part of the group there, we got chatting about how we could start to approach the topic of PPI and began to think about ways that we could try to involve children and young people and what is, after all, their research. And in particular in the CAYA space, and looking particularly in how we can work with young people with cancer. And how we do it in a way that's, I suppose, appropriate, young person focused, and also leads to good and solid outcomes for everyone involved in the process. And I think a lot of time when people think about research initially, and a lot of people would assume it's someone in a lab looking at cells down a microscope or doing that kind of work. But really, when we start to think about research a little bit more broadly and how research impacts on patients and their families, we need to look at it in a lot more of a broader context. So here are just some of the different ways and different things that young people could potentially become involved in and contribute to. So, research projects, as we've mentioned already, they could also be research partners in terms of actually driving the research process forward, coming up with the question that needs to be answered and how it could be answered. Clinical trials is also a big part of what we do in relation to research taking place here in the National Children's Cancer Service. But it's also about trying to improve the service that we provide. And I think, thinking about how young people can contribute to the development of new services in the future. And really, it's about transforming children and young people from being purely research subjects into research partners. As we began to think about how we could potentially do this, I think it was important to try and draw on the expertise and experience of lots of different groups of people. And we're really lucky to have a very strong team behind us and helping us to actually drive forward the development and now the running of the YPAG. So as you can see here, we've drawn together people from the clinical space, the academic space, but also those people who have a direct experience in working with and supporting children and young people and families with cancer, and also experience in actually working with children and young people in a youth-friendly, fun and focused way. So we began to think about how we could actually work with young people in a way that's somewhat formal in that it's a process that's done already in other parts of the world, but also when thinking how we could not create something that might be sustainable. So we looked to the work of the Generation R group in the UK, and we also linked in with the EYPAGnet, which is the European Young Persons Advisory Group Network. And we used their expertise and tools they had already published online to actually develop the Young Persons Advisory Group. And I suppose as part of that YPAG, we have a vision, and we believe that children and young people with cancer should have a voice. They should be able to share their opinions and be actively involved in the design and delivery of clinical research and services to make sure they are relevant and suited to their needs. So with this in mind, we began to recruit interested young people, and we have had a number of different YPAG meetings over the last almost a year now, so it'll be a year come June. And you can see here we do fun things like different group games, activities, arts and crafts. We also get to hear from different researchers, learn about their work. We recently got a tour of a lab in UCD. But I suppose the most important thing that the YPAG gets to do is it gets to feed back and help researchers with their work in this area. So researchers have asked YPAG questions in relation to the types of written information that's provided to young people who might be potentially joining a clinical trial, from all the way to how a trial is actually going to be designed and what is the best way to design a trial to try and engage and involve young people. So there's just some pictures here on your screen of some of the recent meetings that we've had and some of the different things that the group has been up to. But I think it's better to actually hear directly from members of the YPAG themselves. Unfortunately, no one was able to join us live today, but we were able to get some feedback from one of our group members, Erin, about our most recent YPAG meeting. So you can see it here on the screen, just about the different things that happen at a YPAG meeting and how much the YPAG members, they get from being involved in the group. So really, I think to finish off today, this is a shameless plug to everyone that might be involved in this space, that we are always looking for more young people to get involved if they're interested. You can find out more at our website, on our social media, or through our email address here. But also to make people aware that the YPAG is there for researchers as well. And we are always looking for interested researchers who are looking to speak to young people and get some more information in relation to the PPI aspects of your research. And we arrange a number of different YPAG meetings a year, and we would always be happy to hear from new researchers who are looking to engage with young people in this area to help and support your research going forward. Happy to take any questions. Thank you for the opportunity to present today.
Thanks so much, Peter, for a great talk. It's great to see all the work happening with the YPAG, and it's a really exciting time for PPI. So thank you. So thanks so much to all of our great speakers. We have a few minutes for questions if you want to put them in the Q&A. I see there's plenty of questions already there. So the Q&A function is at the bottom of your screen for anyone. So the first question we have is for Suzanne. Suzanne, great talk. Thank you so much. Sounds like a really interesting project. I'm just wondering if you involved PPI in your work.
Yeah, thanks for the question. And obviously with Peter being a member of the research team, we have been able to get some input from the patients, from young people themselves, particularly around the design of our questionnaire, because obviously we are asking for a lot of very personal information. We also actually named the project by gathering some views from young people about how we would present the project. And we are open to helping to design the logo, but going forward, the aim is to have a formal steering group. It's taken a long time to get through some of the governance arrangements for this project. So now that that's in place, we will be looking for members of to join our steering committee. But yeah, we've been very well supported with input from young people to date, and looking forward to working with them more.
Thanks, Suzanne. That's great to hear. And my next question is for Noelle. Noelle, fantastic to see this much needed service being developed. You mentioned the impact on potentially affected family members. Does their genetic counselling testing take place within the services you provide, or do they get referred out to another service?
Hi, thanks, Karen. Thanks, Nikki, for the question. I just replied online, but this service, I guess we're really lucky at CHI Crumlin because we have a department of clinical genetics who sees both adults and children. So once I confirm cancer predisposition syndrome in a child, the next step through our MDT is to refer them directly to the Department of Clinical Genetics, and that's on site here at Crumlin. So families are not waiting an inordinate amount of time to be cascaded. It's essentially expedited and streamlined. And then if we confirm the variant in a parent, then the Department of Clinical Genetics automatically then will test siblings. So we're seeing more and more children confirmed. But yeah, it's working really well because we're all on site in the same institution.
Great, thanks, Noelle. And we have another question for you here. Is cancer treatment changed when a cancer predisposition syndrome is detected? If so, how? And what is the vision for the service in the next few years?
Yeah, so that's a really good question and not easy to answer in 3 lines. But I guess the first thing is that we might change how we surveil children or look at them during treatment. So for instance, if you know that someone has a gene defect, we tend to avoid CT, for example, and we tend to use MRI and ultrasound for assessments. Sometimes we will change the type of radiation therapy that we will recommend. So we might recommend proton radiation therapy rather than photon radiation therapy. So we send some children abroad for this treatment if they have a particular gene problem, because we know that radiation will damage healthy cells as well as tumor cells, and we want to try and limit the amount of normal tissue that receives radiation doses. Sometimes we also see lots of toxicity with chemotherapy in children who have a gene issue, and so sometimes we have to consider whether we change the approach or use different medicines. Sometimes, increasingly immunotherapy, so immune-based medicine, is becoming of interest for people who have a gene problem. And I guess surgical techniques sometimes differ as well. So we do take it into account. It doesn't always change treatment, but it's something that's always on the back of our minds. And then going forward in terms of risks, so if you have a gene issue, you may develop a cancer, but you may be at risk of developing multiple cancers. And so we might end up, let's just say you start off and you have a brain tumor and you're confirmed with a gene mutation, but that mutation also causes you to have, let's say, kidney tumors or abdominal tumors. We also would incorporate imaging of those regions into the child's surveillance as they grow older, and that changes over time depending on the age of the child. So lots of things to consider, and certainly something that we take on board with all of the children that we see.
Great, thanks so much, Noelle. My next question is for Jennifer. So brilliant talk, Jennifer, thank you. Great to see the sustainability of the project. Is there any scope to have components of the intervention delivered online also?
Yeah, so this is actually an aspect of the intervention that we're currently exploring in our first study. So while completing interviews with all the families, we're gaining their perspective on whether including an online component of the intervention will have benefits and what challenges it may face, and then also exploring whether we might do kind of a hybrid approach where there is some in-person and then some online aspects of the intervention. So we're currently exploring that option at the moment with families. So once the study is completed, we'll have more concrete findings for that.
Brilliant, thanks so much, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Great to see. So Luke, you mentioned that the inhibitors you're working on are already approved. Are they approved for other cancer types?
Yeah, so not all of the inhibitors that we're testing are currently approved, but we're preferencing the ones that are. So they're primarily approved for other cancer types, but there are certain ones that are already approved in leukemia. But it will definitely reduce the barrier to incorporating them into treatment by preferencing ones that are already approved in the cancer space generally.
Absolutely. Yeah, great, thank you. Peter, what's your biggest learning been working with the YPAG so far?
I think it's that don't underestimate the interest that young people with cancer have in this area. They are enthusiastic, opinionated bunch who always have something to say about a topic, no matter what it is. So don't presume just because you think your research is too complex or, you know, a bit too niche. I think that's the thing I've learned the most so far, for sure, is that young people are interested in getting involved and helping. And, you know, they often can see the benefit of research in a way that maybe, you know, you mightn't even have considered actually.
Yeah,
so to think about trying to get them involved.
Across the board with our PPI as well. Don't underestimate the amount of information and that people want, that they're interested in. We found that, you know, sometimes we just provide the bare bones of information and they want more because they want to learn all about it and they are very interested. So I think that is a really big learning. So Naomi, I have a question for you. You mentioned the international literature giving you an idea of what internationally is the lived experience of the CAYA population returning to education and work. Do you think there is any unique issues that will arise from the Irish context specifically?
Yeah, I suppose that's the beauty of research, isn't it? And underlining the importance to find that out. And I suppose we'll come with our preconceived ideas of what we think the issues might be. But I know, reflecting on when we did research on return to work after breast cancer, something that surprised us, and of course we had similar themes and some overlap with international findings, but what surprised us was a reduced awareness for not just women with breast cancer, but healthcare professionals on employment rights and entitlements. So I suppose that's prompted me at the moment to think, I'd be really interested to find out, do AYAs know that they're entitled to X, Y, and Z? Are they aware about the disability access route to education, for example, application now? So that's something I'm wondering will come up, but we'll watch this space and hopefully in a few months or a year's time, we can present those preliminary findings.
Great, thank you. We might leave it there in the interest of time. There's still lots of questions coming in, but it's 1:55 now. So look, I just want to really thank all the speakers for your time. They've been great talks, so we really appreciate it. And I want to thank everyone for logging on today. It's been great to have such a high attendance at our webinar. It shows the interest in CAYA, so hopefully we'll have lots more in future to come. And just a reminder about our CAYA newsletter. If you want to sign up, Rebecca has put the link in the chat. And I want to finish on a plug. We have Daffodil Day coming up on March 24th this year. And as always, we would really appreciate your support. So anyone who wants to support and get involved, please do check out our website and we'd really appreciate it. Thanks a mil, everyone. Bye.